in a Kareem taxi, and after a second failed attempt to go to the Martyrs Monument, I'm now trying to go to shoot some stuff around Baghdad Tower in the Mansour neighborhood. So hopefully that works out. I'm realizing anything that involves any sort of entrance or anything that's walled or fenced off, it's often arbitrarily closed or has opening and closing hours that aren't listed or just aren't generally known. I've found that the taxi drivers generally don't know when things are open or closed, so you just have to go there, and more often than not there's a whole bukra thing here in Baghdad, which means tomorrow. So soldiers who are guarding sites will often tell you to come back the next day, and you're kind of not sure why. Well, that was absolutely touching. My driver, whose name was Luai, he told me that he had family in Michigan, and that his Toyota Corolla was actually imported or exported from the United States and imported it here to Iraq. And he dropped me off here at Baghdad Tower and would not accept any payment. And I insisted. I was trying to force a 10,000 dinar note into his hand. It was about a 7,500 dinar ride, and he said he wouldn't take any money. So I'm here at the base of Baghdad Tower, and it looks to be, the whole place is fenced off, as maybe this is part of this sort of Baghdad construction renaissance. But at the beginning of the, not the beginning, well, the early days of the occupation, let's say, the invasion had already concluded. But I had actually climbed up to the top of Baghdad Tower with a group of looters who'd come down from Kurdistan. And of course, you might imagine I was hoping to go in the tower, and that looks like it's completely not possible. It does look like it's all fixed up. And I shot in 2003, I shot a lot of photos here in the Mansour neighborhood, which is on the other side of the green zone from Karada and Saddam Street and Firdos Square, and sort of the center of Baghdad where I've been staying. And yeah, it looks like this thing's actually in pretty good shape. It was formerly known, like many things here, was formerly known as Saddam Tower and was renamed as Baghdad Tower. I don't know if it was in the de-Baathification process. That was a complete disaster, authored by or ordered by Paul Bremer, who is the American Occupation Authority here in Baghdad. But yeah, I'm gonna maybe walk around the periphery of this and just see if there's anything I can see. I want to shoot some photos of the base here. Alright, well, it's not possible to go in the tower, but there is a little window through the construction site where you can see it looks like it is under repair. And when I was here in 2003, the tower was being looted. The innards were being stripped of copper wire, and the Americans weren't doing anything to stop it. And now, my friend here is saying that it may reopen in 1 year. So it's cool to see it again. It's actually looking pretty good. It looks like they've fixed all the windows up. Since access to Baghdad Tower was non-existent, I am actually walking towards the gigantic Ar-Rahman mega mosque that the late dictator Saddam Hussein was constructing when the Americans invaded. It was meant to be gigantic, and construction stopped, full stop, when the US and UK and their allies invaded. And I photographed the mosque from Baghdad Tower at the time. It was way off in the distance, but for some reason I can't remember why it wasn't possible to visit. I don't know. I remember taking taxis over here and trying to get close to it at the time, and 20 years ago, and it was definitely not accessible. And I'm coming back here now, 2 decades later, and it still has the cranes towering over it that were there in 2003. I'm not expecting any kind of access. Just gonna see how close I can walk to it and see what happens. Well, here, just over this fence, you can at least get a glimpse of the exterior structure. Wow, it is absolutely massive. This is the closest I've gotten to it. I'm going to see if I can walk any further near it. This would have been, or will be, one of the world's biggest mosques. I mean, gigantic does not describe it. It's dauntingly huge. It definitely feels as if the successive Iraqi governments that were initially installed, starting with during the American occupation and thereafter, just sort of don't know what to do with this place, because it is at once, it's a symbol of Saddamist megalomania that Iraq has sought and fought to distance itself from. At the same time, it would be, you know, probably a waste just to tear this thing down and give up on it. But I would imagine, owing to corruption and poverty and war and, you know, all sorts of other factors, there's no money in the coffers to finish building this. I mean, in you know, a country that has been at war basically since 1980, with a couple of years off here and there. It's, you know, maybe 1989 between the Iran-Iraq War and the invasion of Kuwait, and maybe between the end of 2011 and 2014, mid-2014, when the IS takeover happened and the Americans came back. But it seems like this place is just it's a graveyard of a legacy project that no one knows what to do about. Since I've been getting immensely frustrated about how difficult things are to access, and I've essentially gotten absolutely nothing done today, I just spontaneously decided to get a shave at this high-end salon, and they kind of didn't know what to do with me. One of the helper was Bangladeshi, so I was using my, I don't know, like 4 words of Bangla that I know from living in New York, and I was asking them where the entrance was to the mega mosque. This is next to the mega mosque, and they had no idea what I was asking. It's one of those things where what I was saying just didn't translate. That's all right. Iraq, in its republican form, particularly since it became fully Ba'athist, which was the party of Saddam Hussein, of Arab socialism, that ruled from the coup in 1968 until Saddam was deposed by the United States and United Kingdom on this day in April 9th in 2003. Society doesn't have any kind of tradition of openness. It's always been a police state, and Iraq has always been in, you know, various forms of war since 1980, and that's not including the Kurdish insurgency in the north in the 1960s and 1970s. And it still has, you know, even though Iraq is opening up and the visa regime has been greatly liberalized, which I think is a really positive step, Iraq still has a long way to go. And for somebody like me, who's very goal-oriented and coming here to sort of do specific things and hoping for specific outcomes, Iraq is still a hard place. It's an incredibly friendly place. I love the people of Iraq, from Kurdistan all the way to the south. I mean, that's partly why I keep coming back here. But again, like a site like this, it's still off limits. And that, you know, the country kind of has a culture of this, of being what is known as a mukhabarat, or security state. And, you know, I don't know when that's going to change. I think it's going to take quite a while. Well, I ended up having to get the hell out of there, away from the mega mosque. Some guy from inside the site started yelling at me and walking really fast to where I had been recording with the GoPro. And I didn't want to run away because obviously I wasn't doing anything wrong and I was outside the perimeter, but I ended up just meeting this doctor who was smoking a cigarette in front of his house, and he just gave me a ride to a whole nother part of town. So now I'm visiting this Cuneiform monument that I think was built post-war. But this doctor was a cardiologist who was going to a shift at the hospital. Oh, his name was Emily. He was so lovely. I was pretty touched by that. Today's been it's so amazing here. There's so many feelings going on at once. This Cuneiform monument, I have to say, is pretty impressive. It's titled Saving Iraqi Culture, and it was apparently commissioned by the mayor of Baghdad in 2010, so it was years after I first came to this city, and it was in basically the last phase of the formal American occupation here. And apparently in cuneiform it reads that writing began here, as in here in Iraq. I have to say, this is pretty cool. I met a YouTube guy at my hotel who I befriended, and he said he had some trouble with the police here the other day where they told him that photography was forbidden or something, or some sort of thing. So I just got rolling with the GoPro as soon as I walked up, and I can see there definitely are security here, and they're watching me, but they haven't said anything. And this sculpture is really cool. I'm gonna just do a little 360. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, I'm in yet another Kareem taxi, and I'm rushing to Firdos Square, which will exactly mark the end of my initial goal, which was to be here at the exact moment 20 years later when the American Marines pulled down the Saddam statue, which sort of formally marked the fall of the regime here. So racing in traffic seems to be pretty light, actually. Getting towards Iftar, there's actually less cars on the road, so this should work. Well, exactly 20 years ago, almost to the minute, I think I made it. I raced here in a taxi, and we actually made pretty good time from the Cuneiform monument. But it is here in Firdos Square where the statue of Saddam Hussein was taken down. And that was sort of a tragically momentous moment in Iraq's history. And interestingly for me, it's not being marked at all. I thought there might be some news crews here, local news crews, Western news crews, international news crews. The Saddam statue was would have been right over my shoulder. And yeah, the square has been completely remade. There used to be 37 columns that rung the square that were supposedly to symbolize that Saddam Hussein was born in 1937. I don't know how much of these facts about his rule and his megalomania were, you know, how accurate some of these things are, but they're things you read and things you hear. But yeah, it's kind of amazing and kind of beautiful that really nothing is going on here. You know, to see Baghdad mostly at peace, it's a really, really positive thing, and something that, you know, something that should have taken place a very long time ago. The American and British invasion of Iraq was an absolute cataclysmic tragedy. It just, you know, they tried to remake the society, not even in their own image, but in some sort of sectarian and ethnic confessional construct that was meant to sort of de-emphasize Sunni Arabs and empower the Shia and empower the Kurds, and there were, you know, meant to be all these positive outcomes for it, but, you know, it's been 20 long and often brutally hellish years for this country, and I'm happy to see that, you know, things here for now at least seem to be healing, and I hope it stays that way. I shot this photo here in Firdos Square 20 years ago after the Marines pulled down the statue. And it says, "All done, go home," in broken English on the plinth that is no longer there. I'm kind of stunned that I made this happen. Today was a bit of a crazy day and difficult to access places and hot, and I met some amazing individuals, and I think I nearly got in trouble at the mega mosque. I don't know, but I'm so happy to be back here in Iraq, on a personal level. And I think this is kind of a historic anniversary, even if no one else seems to really think so, at least demonstrably. You know, what happened here 20 Aprils ago was really momentous.